There's all kinds of contention and pissing matches around, well, we're eating more carbs now, no, we're eating more fat now. The reality is we're eating more now, period. And the more, and this is also where it gets super annoying, they have this labeled under grains. Is that what it is? Added grains, flour, cereal products, and then added fats, oils, and dairies. So what they've done within this bag is they have a mix of extremely hot, medium, and mild chips. And again, if you followed any of my work, any of Stefan Guillenet's work, and you think about hyperpalatability, palate fatigue, what these folks have done in one bag is created a randomized stochastic distribution in palate experience, which makes the product more addictive. So I was checking this out and I was like, wow, this is really interesting. So I tracked down who the manufacturer was, and it's kind of like a Coca-Cola owned company or something like that. They had a contact page, and so I shot them an email, never expected to hear anything back. And I said, hey, I'm a food researcher. I'm just really curious, by chance, does the distribution of hot versus medium versus mild follow a power law distribution? And I had a couple of other questions, fired it off, never expected to hear anything. 2 days later, I got an email back, and the gal said, hey, Rob, it's great to hear from you. Fantastic questions. The scientists in the lab are huge fans. They love all of your work. And I was like, shit. And they were so tickled that, yes, the distribution of these things follow a power law distribution. So what the food manufacturers are doing, they are exceptionally well steeped in evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, chaos mathematics as it applies to habituating someone to an addictive substance. If you wanted to get a mouse or a human addicted on cocaine, you wouldn't give the individual the same dose every time. One time it would be a big dose, the next time it would be a small dose, the other time there would be no dose, because the anticipatory nature of what's going to happen next heightens that dopamine response. So the level that these folks are operating on is so sophisticated, so dialed in, it is absolutely jaw-dropping. And on the standard medical model, if you were to even try to talk about hyperpalatable foods, optimum foraging strategy, palate fatigue, they look at you like you have three heads. But the folks that are profiteering from our health crisis are probably better steeped at evolutionary biology than we are. So that's something to noodle on, and it's also something to noodle on. Just as a side note, when we get into pissing matches about is 30 grams of carbohydrate versus 50 grams of carbohydrate a ketogenic diet, we are really missing the boat. Like, we have so lost the narrative, it's almost painful, because this is what we're competing against, and they are absolutely kicking our asses. It's interesting, we have a pretty good ability to look at and assess both the value and the relative caloric content of carbohydrates, of fats. Once we combine them, it's like we're drunk at a casino and we've been on a winning streak that turns into a losing streak. We lose all ability to distinguish what is really going on with those foods. And then this is above and beyond even the palatability factor. So again, when we're in these kind of battles over is it high fat, is it low carb, I think we really need to keep an eye on the fact that these hyper-palatable refined foods are arguably, from my perspective, probably the place that we need to focus the most attention to. And this is another piece that came out just on the heels of the original paper that was suggesting that low-carb diets will shorten your life. And this is from an absolute hero of mine, Dr. Ioannidis. He has been critical of the nutritional research community and really the scientific research community at large for a long time, has taken a lot of heat for his positions, but he really makes some amazing cases. So he makes a case that if we really hold a standard of what scientific practice is, that the current iteration of epidemiology really doesn't fit within that very well. Authors often use causal language when reporting the findings of these studies. And again, you guys can look at some of these implausible estimates of benefits or risks associated with a diet probably reflect almost exclusively the magnitude of the cumulative biases of this type of research. Similarly, limited self-reported nutrition data, this is the food frequency questionnaires, et cetera, ascertained with a handful of questions and self-reported items, fail to acknowledge or accurately measure a system that matches or exceeds the genome in complexity. So what he's saying is that we're basically taking 2 snapshots out of time. This is frequently the way it happens. We use a food frequency questionnaire. We know that people lie like crazy. They have terrible memories, and we're relying on this to provide a data signal in a system that the nutritional interaction within our bodies between the gut microbiome, our hormonal state and whatnot is arguably orders of magnitude more complex than the totality of our genetics. And this is what we're hanging our hats on. This is what we're hanging public policy on. It's absolutely ridiculous, but it's so entrenched in the kind of scientific culture and academia that nobody other than a few people are really calling to question this whole story. This is, I want to try to wrap this all into the context of, okay, well, what would go into effective health and longevity? And so a lot of the recommendations that are being made around fasting and super low protein intake, they are a tool, they have utility, but people have gone to crazyville on this stuff. And probably next year, this is going to be the talk that I'm going to do. And if I'm going to do it, I really want like an hour and 15 minutes to fully unpack that one, just saying. So some thoughts on health and longevity: don't overeat. That is so trite to say in a world of hyper-palatable, highly processed foods. But in general, if folks just don't overeat, things go generally pretty darn well. Mind your circadian biology. I think the wake-sleep cycle is possibly as important as sleep. Find an appropriate glycemic load. That's kind of my case around the 7-day carb test. Some people will do better with some carbs, some fewer. Some types of carbs work better for folks than others. Do a little bit of tinkering around that. Be mindful of immunogenic foods. To the degree that the paleo diet concept has any value, I really think it's in this immunogenic food story, looking at grains, legumes, dairy, possibly nightshades, FODMAPs, things like that. Like, that was really a powerful contribution that the paleo diet made to this story. But at the end of the day, if we were to focus on a low carbohydrate diet and then just give a little bit of a wink and a nod to immunogenic foods, we're done. And then you don't need all the kind of crazy religious type stuff that goes on with the paleo diet concept. Lift some weights, use a sauna, find some meaning and social connections. What does meaning and social connections really boil down to? Coffee. It means coffee. Also, coffee stimulates autophagy on a global level. Lifting weights stimulates autophagy in the muscles and also activates mTOR in an appropriate fashion. So at the end of the day, markets are going to figure most of this stuff out. Like, markets, and I'm one of those crazy libertarian people, because if people live longer, they win. Bottom line. So they're looking at this in as dispassionate and no dog in the fight a way as they can. And they really like what Ioannidis is saying with regards to how broken nutritional research is. And then they've hosted a number of conferences, and they are not inviting the vegans to these things. They're inviting the low carb thought leaders to these events, because when they have put research teams out to critically assess what do you think is going to allow people to live longer and healthier, what they're coming back with is something that looks like probably a peri-ketogenic diet. So in the meantime, with all that, like, we need to really keep our feet on the ground, help educate people. And I will go out there on a limb and say we collectively need to really rally behind the concept of sustainability. I don't know if folks have followed Diana Rogers' work. We have to defend, whether you're Weston A. Price or straight up keto or whatever, if you want the freedom to be able to eat the way you want to eat and feed your family the way you want to feed them, and if you want a medical system that gives a hat tip towards the notion that an appropriate glycemic load diet and a highly nutrient-dense diet, we need to fight these folks, because they are not interested in happy collaboration. They want to make it impossible for us to live the lives that we want to live.